Chapter 5 of Mary, Queen of Scots. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Mary, Queen of Scots, by Jacob Abbott. Return to Scotland. Mary was to sail from the port of Calais. Calais is on the northern coast of France, opposite to Dover in England, these towns being on opposite sides of the Straits of Dover, where the channel between England and France is very narrow. Still, the distance is so great that the land on either side is ordinarily not visible on the other. There is no good natural harbour at Calais, nor in fact at any other point on the French coast. The French have had to supply the deficiency by artificial piers and breakwaters. There are several very capacious and excellent harbours on the English side. This may have been one cause, among others, of the great naval superiority which England has attained. When Queen Elizabeth found that Mary was going to persevere in her intention of returning to her native land, she feared that she might, after her arrival in Scotland, and after getting established in power there, form a scheme for making war upon her dominions, and attempt to carry into effect her claim upon the English crown. She wished to prevent this. Would it be prudent to intercept Mary upon her passage? She reflected on the subject with the cautious calculation which formed so striking a part of her character, and felt in doubt. Her taking Mary a prisoner, and confining her a captive in her own land, might incense Queen Catherine, who was now regent of France, and also awaken a general resentment in Scotland, so as to bring upon her the hostility of those two countries, and thus perhaps make more mischief than the securing of Mary's person would prevent. She accordingly, as a previous step, sent to Throckmorton, her ambassador in France, directing him to have an interview with Queen Catherine, and ascertain how far she would feel disposed to take Mary's part. Throckmorton did this. Queen Catherine gave no direct reply. She said that both herself and the young king wished well to Elizabeth, and to Mary too, that it was her desire that the two queens might be on good terms with each other, that she was a friend to them both, and should not take a part against either of them. This was all that Queen Elizabeth could expect, and she formed her plans for intercepting Mary on her passage. She sent to Throckmorton, asking him to find out, if he could, what port Queen Mary was to sail from, and to send her word. She then gave orders to her naval commanders to assemble as many ships as they could, and hold them in readiness to sail into the seas between England and France, for the purpose of exterminating the pirates, which she said had lately become very numerous there. Throckmorton took occasion, in a conversation which he had with Mary soon after this, to inquire from what port she intended to sail, but she did not give him the information. She suspected his motive, and merely said, in reply to his question, that she hoped the wind would prove favourable for carrying her away as far as possible from the English coast, whatever might be the point from which she should take her departure. Throckmorton then endeavoured to find out the arrangements of the voyage by other means, but without much success. He wrote to Elizabeth that he thought Mary would sail from either Havre or Calais, that he would go eastward along the shore of the continent, by Flanders and Holland, till she gained a considerable distance from the English coast, and then would sail north along the eastern shores of the German Ocean. He advised that Elizabeth should send spies to Calais and to Havre, and perhaps to other French ports, to watch there, and to let her know whenever they observed any appearances of preparations for Mary's departure. In the meantime, as the hour for Mary's farewell to Paris and all its scenes of luxury and splendour drew near, those who had loved her were drawn more closely to her in heart than ever, and those who had been envious and jealous began to relent, and to look upon her with feelings of compassion and of kind regard. Queen Catherine treated her with extreme kindness during the last few days of her stay, and she accompanied her for some distance on her journey, with every manifestation of sincere affection and goodwill. She stopped at length at St. Germain, and there with many tears she bade her gentle daughter-in-law a long and last farewell. Many princes and nobles, especially of the family of Guise, Mary's relatives, accompanied her through the whole journey. They formed quite a long cavalcade, and attracted great attention in all the towns and districts through which they passed. They travelled slowly, but at length arrived at Calais, where they waited nearly a week to complete the arrangements for Mary's embarkation. At length the day arrived for her to set sail. A large concourse of spectators assembled to witness the scene. 4 ships had been provided for the transportation of the party and their effects. 2 of these were galleys. They were provided with banks of oars and large crews of rowers, by means of which the vessels could be propelled when the wind failed. The 2 other vessels were merely vessels of burden, to carry the furniture and other effects of the passengers. Many of the Queen's friends were to accompany her to Scotland. The 4 Marys were among them. She bade those that were to remain behind farewell, and prepared to embark on board the royal galley. Her heart was very sad. Just at this time a vessel which was coming in struck against the pier, in consequence of a heavy sea which was rolling in, and of the distraction of the seamen occasioned by Mary's embarkation. The vessel which struck was so injured by the concussion that it filled immediately and sank. Most of the seamen on board were drowned. This accident produced great excitement and confusion. Mary looked upon the scene from the deck of her vessel, which was now slowly moving from the shore. It alarmed her, and impressed her mind with a sad and mournful sense of the dangers of the elements to whose mercy she was now to be committed for many days. "What an unhappy omen is this!" she exclaimed. She then went to the stern of the ship, looked back at the shore, then knelt down, and covering her face with her hands, sobbed aloud. "Farewell, France!" she exclaimed. "I shall never, never see thee more." Presently, when her emotions for a moment subsided, she would raise her eyes and take another view of the slowly receding shore, and then exclaim again, "Farewell, my beloved France! Farewell, farewell!" She remained in this position, suffering this anguish, for 5 hours, when it began to grow dark, and she could no longer see the shore. She then rose, saying that her beloved country was gone from her sight for ever. "The darkness, like a thick veil, hides thee from my sight, and I shall see thee no more. So farewell, beloved land, farewell for ever." She left her place at the stern, but she would not leave the deck. She made them bring up a bed and place it for her there near the stern. They tried to induce her to go into the cabin, or at least take some supper, but she would not. She lay down upon her bed. She charged the helmsman to awaken her at the dawn, if the land was in sight when the dawn should appear. She then wept herself to sleep. During the night the air was calm, and the vessels in which Mary and her company had embarked made such small progress, being worked only by the oars, that the land came into view again with the grey light of the morning. The helmsman awoke Mary, and the sight of the shore renewed her anguish and tears. She said that she could not go. She wished that Elizabeth's ships would come in sight, so as to compel her squadron to return. But no English fleet appeared. On the contrary, the breeze freshened. The sailors unfurled the sails, the oars were taken in, and the great crew of oarsmen rested from their toil. The ships began to make their way rapidly through the rippling water. The land soon became a faint, low cloud in the horizon, and in an hour all traces of it entirely disappeared. The voyage continued for 10 days. They saw nothing of Elizabeth's cruisers. It was afterward ascertained, however, that these ships were at one time very near to them, and were only prevented from seeing and taking them by a dense fog, which at that time happened to cover the sea. One of the vessels of burden was seen and taken, and carried to England. It contained, however, only some of Mary's furniture and effects. She herself escaped the danger. The fog, which was thus Mary's protection at one time, was a source of great difficulty and danger at another, for, when they were drawing near to the place of their landing in Scotland, they were enveloped in a fog so dense that they could scarcely see from one end of the vessel to the other. They stopped the progress of their vessels, and kept continually sounding, and when at length the fog cleared away, they found themselves involved in a labyrinth of rocks and shoals of the most dangerous character. They made their escape at last, and went on to safety toward the land. Mary said, however, that she felt at the time entirely indifferent as to the result. She was so disconsolate and wretched at having parted for ever from all that was dear to her, that it seemed to her that she was equally willing to live or to die. Mary, who among her other accomplishments had a great deal of poetic talent, wrote some lines called her Farewell to France, which have been celebrated from that day to this. They are as follows: Adieu. Adieu, plaisant pays de France.